Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me share a quote with you. The great Les Brown once said, "You can't see the picture when you're in the frame." If you felt stuck in your fitness, mindset, or life as a whole, head down to the link in the show notes and reach out to learn more about Project Endure Coaching so that we can help you step outside of the frame and bridge the gap between who you are now and who you want to be. We can't wait to hear from you. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 100. Today, it is just me, Joe Rinaldi. I am recording this episode on May 26th, 2023. It is the exact date 2 years ago that I put in my 4 weeks notice at work to kick off this pursuit of full-time entrepreneurship, this pursuit of ownership, the pursuit of impact and potential. 2 years later, I've learned so much, I've grown so much, and I wouldn't be here talking to you if I didn't take the risk. And so this 100th episode is going to be a look back on the story of how we got here today and what we learned along the way. I am not sure whether this episode is going to be 30 minutes or 60 minutes or 90 minutes or something completely different. I am going with the flow. I am going to do my best to touch on everything in chronological order. And I am going to speak from the heart. And I appreciate you being here to listen. I hope that you walk away from this podcast with value. I hope that you walk away from this podcast feeling inspired. And I want to thank you in advance for listening, for supporting, and for believing in what we stand for here at Project Endure. So with that being said, I want to do a quick recap of my story. I kicked off this podcast, episode 1, almost 2 years ago, with my story. And at the time, it was really challenging for me to put my life into words. I remember sitting at my desk in my apartment in East Falls, Philadelphia, underneath a blanket to improve the audio quality, just sweating, hot, frustrated, because it took me multiple tries to record a podcast episode that I was happy enough with to put out for the public. And looking back, I'm so glad that I kept trying. I'm so glad that I put it out because it was the start of something special. It was the start of this experience where every week I get to sit down with a special human being and hear about the hard things that people have handled, people have pursued, and the ways that they've learned and grown and benefited from those things. For anybody listening who doesn't know who I am and where I came from, I grew up in Westfield, New Jersey. I have a mom, dad, younger brother, younger sister, and I had a great childhood. I was diagnosed with a genetic eye condition called Best disease when I was 10 years old. And to put it in simple terms, the condition causes progressive loss of central eyesight. It is unpredictable. It is rare. It is, again, progressive. And so it gets worse over time. Sitting here at 29 years old, I am legally blind in my right eye, and I am grateful that my left eye is good enough to get me through on a day-to-day. I can read, I can write, I can drive. I can do just about everything that everybody else can do, except maybe hit a baseball. And so with that being said, my childhood was hard in that way. I felt very different from the people around me, and I had to come to terms with the fact that this thing I was struggling with was something that I couldn't shake. It was something that I couldn't change. And that took a long time to surrender, to come to peace with that. And I'll fast forward to my college years. I decided to walk onto the football team my freshman year of college at Bucknell University. I walked on and didn't didn't get to play too much before I had to stop because I lost eyesight after a hit. And so my college football career ended early. My athletic career ended abruptly, and I was left feeling lost. I mentioned that because I channeled that into the weight room and I fell in love again with fitness. I've been lifting weights since I was in middle school. So let's chalk that up to 15 plus years now. And during college, I found myself in the weight room all of the time. I also stopped drinking halfway through my freshman year of college, which is a funny statement within itself because most people begin to drink during college. However, I was stopping. And that left me feeling isolated. It left me feeling alone. It left me feeling different than everybody else around me. And so I was the person who was in the library at 6 a.m. on a Saturday. I was the person who was in the gym at midnight on a Friday. I was the person who was doing their own thing, feeling very, very, very alone. And I'm so glad I stuck to my gut and that I poured myself into academics. I poured myself into fitness. I ended up transferring so I can come back, live closer to my parents, live with my parents, and pursue a degree in exercise science, which eventually led me to graduate school here in Philadelphia. And, a big part of my story happened that summer before graduate school where I lost a significant portion of my eyesight. It was abrupt, it was unexpected, and it shook me in a big way. And I almost let that stop me from pursuing graduate school. And I'm so glad that I didn't. I was lucky enough to have my parents who encouraged me to go, who told me that I couldn't think in terms of what if I go blind? What if I can't finish? What if this goes wrong? And instead to think in terms of even if something happens, I will figure it out then. And that is the mindset that I went into graduate school with. And I got there and it was hard. That first year of graduate school was the hardest, darkest year of my life, hands down. I felt alone. I felt sad. I felt a profound sense of sadness. And no matter what I did or what I thought, I could not put a smile on my face. And sure, I put a smile on when I was, in class and around other people. I was the kid who sat in the front of the room, raised his hand, participated, great grades, in shape, friends with everybody. On the inside, it was the opposite. I was hurting so bad and I felt like I didn't know where to turn because when I thought of my faith, when I thought of God, there weren't very many good thoughts during that season. It felt like God had left me. It felt like he didn't care. It felt like, to me at least, if there was a God who was so good, why and how could he let something like this happen to somebody like me? Fast forward to the end of that first year, and I started spending time with who is now my wife, Michaela, and I started feeling better about things. I started feeling more like myself. She invited me to church, and of course, I went because I liked her and I wanted to spend time with her. And I had this moment in the front row of that church on that Sunday morning that I don't know if I'll ever be able to put into words. It was almost like God put his hand on my shoulder and laughed and said, I got you. You thought that I left you. You thought that I stopped chasing you. And instead, you started chasing a girl, but I never stopped chasing you. I was here the whole time. And right now, you are right where you need to be with the person you need to be with. That kicked off a new season of growth for me as a person, for me in my faith, uh, for me in a lot of ways. I knew that Michaela was the person that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. And there was this shift in perspective for me. Up until that point in my life, I had always felt like the victim. I had felt like the world was against me, life was unfair, and it was sad for me. However, I realized that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with this person that I loved with all of my heart, and how I chose to view my circumstances that I couldn't change was going to impact that person that I love so much on a deep level. And so I decided to change my perspective. And over the course of time, what was once a burden became a blessing. I like to say, what I've lost in sight, I've gained in vision. As I've been able to see less and less of the world around me, I feel like I've been able to imagine more and more of what my life could be like, of what life for others could be like. I've been able to see possibilities and opportunities. I've been able to see the positives, the bright side. And there's this great quote from Christine Kane that sums up everything that I just said. And it goes, sometimes when you're in a dark place, you think you've been buried, but you've actually been planted. That quote speaks to me so much. I have a tattoo on my left forearm, my left wrist, that reminds me of those words every single day. Life is happening for us, everything is happening for a reason. And sometimes we can't understand that reason. And that's frustrating. That's hard. That's upsetting. But faith is what allows me to trust that there is a reason. And so, with that being said, it leads us to the end of graduate school. I am now engaged to my best friend. I have my first full time job as a physical therapist here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And I am so excited. I have new grad energy. I am in the clinic. I'm loving every second of it. I'm doing my best. And it took me quite a while to realize that I was feeling exhausted, and not exhausted in the sense of, lack of sleep, physically tired. I was drained because I was doing something that wasn't leading me to the path of fulfillment the way that I had hoped it would. In the world of outpatient physical therapy, there's there tends to be a lot of volume. You're working with multiple people at one time. And for me, that was hard because I wanted to pay attention to the people in front of me. I wanted to fully be there with the person across the table from me, and I couldn't. I had my head on a swivel all day. It was exhausting. And I felt like I was giving 30, maybe 40% of myself to each person who walked in the door. And I was spread so thin, and I couldn't stand it. The pandemic happened, things slowed down, and I had time to think. And in that season, I began to realize that I wanted ownership. I wanted ownership of my life. I wanted to do something that only I could do, something I felt called to do. And I didn't know what that was. In the summer of 2021, or I guess it would be the spring of 2021, Michaela and I celebrated our 1 year wedding anniversary, and we went to Maui, Hawaii for our delayed honeymoon because of the pandemic. And on that trip, I remember feeling so torn. I was anxious, and I couldn't get the thought of leaving my work off my mind. It almost consumed me. And when we got back, again, May 26th, 2021, 2 years ago to this date on the dot, I made that decision and I finalized it. And I realized for myself that taking no risk might have been the biggest risk of all. And I will get into the details of what I learned through this process, how Project Endure has grown and evolved and impacted many people. one of them being myself. And with that being said, I guess we should get into what it looked like to leave my job. In the weeks and months leading up to that decision, I had conversation upon conversation with friends of mine who were doing their own thing, who had their own businesses, who had taken that risk before. And the conversation always ended the same way. The other person would tell me that entrepreneurship was one of the hardest things that they have ever done and also the most rewarding, and they wouldn't change it for the world. And it felt like, as I heard those conversations over and over and over again, that I was climbing up this high dive. And at the top of the high dive, I had to walk to the edge. These conversations were getting me there. And I got to the edge and I stood there and I looked down, and it was a long way down. And I hesitated and I stood at the edge, and I had this one conversation that gave me the push I needed. I don't know what it was. It was just the right time, the right place, the right person, the right words. And I decided to do it. I decided to take ownership. I decided to bet on myself. And the hardest part about all of that was that I did not know what that looked like. I had no idea. Granted, throughout this entire time, through graduate school, through my first few years of full time work, I was coaching on the side. I was working with fitness clients online and a handful in person. And I was doing that early mornings, late nights, on the weekends, whenever I could. I worked very, very hard to build that coaching business to a place that made leaving my job make more sense. And so, without getting into details, I put in a lot of work there. I was able to bridge the gap from a financial standpoint to where it made sense to give it a shot. So, I quit my job, and in the summer of 2021, I remember sitting down at my desk the first full day of full time entrepreneurship, complete ownership. I thought it would feel like freedom. I thought it would feel like bliss. I thought it would feel like the best thing I had ever experienced. And I remember sitting down at my desk. Michaela left for work. I'm all alone, endless opportunities. The entire day is mine. And I felt so overwhelmed, so paralyzed, so anxious. I remember having all of these things on my mind, all of these things that I could do, and I just couldn't pick one. I didn't know what direction I needed to move. It felt like someone had dropped me in the middle of the ocean, and I didn't know which way was up, which way was down. I was lost in that moment, and that scared me so much. I would be not telling the truth if I said I never thought of going back, if I never thought of throwing in the towel. That thought crossed my mind more than once. However, I started to take action. I started to move the ball forward. I started to understand where I needed to put my focus and effort. And with each day came a bit more clarity. With each week came a bit more confidence. With each month came a bit more courage to continue on the path. Now, I have journal entries from the past 2 years that uh, make me very emotional. I didn't expect to go here, but I'll share this. There was one morning in particular where, I'd lost a client and I was just feeling down. It was one of those days already, and there were a few other things that had culminated, leaving me feeling just dark. And I remember crying in my apartment by myself, let's say 10 o'clock on a Tuesday, just curled up in a ball on the couch. And I felt like a child. in that moment. And I wrote about it, and I remember feeling better after writing about it, but it just felt so intense. It felt like the pressure, the weight of the world was on top of me, and I had put it there all myself. I chose this path. And I remember thinking these things, and I remember getting back up and telling myself that I just needed to keep moving forward. I just needed to do the next right thing. And I trusted in that. I trusted in that with everything that I was and everything that I am. I continued to put one foot in front of the other, having faith that each step would reveal the next. And over time, it did. I'm going to take a step back here, and I want to share a few lessons, 10 to be specific, that I've learned through these first 2 years of full time entrepreneurship, of building Project Endure. And so I'll go through these lessons one by one. Might go off on a tangent here and there, but I promise I'll bring it back. And so this part of the podcast, my hope is that somebody out there listening who has created something and wants to build it can feel inspired, or somebody who has already taken a risk, taken a leap, started a business, considers themselves an entrepreneur, that they can take away tangible thoughts and concepts that can be applied to their life as soon as today. And yeah, I'll get into it. So, the first lesson that I learned through full time entrepreneurship has been ownership comes with a cost. When I left my full time job, I realized that there was no ceiling above me. I realized that I could work as hard as I wanted to make as much money and to create as much impact as I wanted. There was no ceiling above me like there was at my first job. At the same time, there was no floor. And so the safety net gets ripped away from underneath you. That sense of stability and security, which I would argue is oftentimes an illusion to begin with, that was ripped away. Didn't have that. And there was also no ceiling. And so that was stressful. That is stressful still to this day. Being an entrepreneur, taking ownership, it comes with a cost. What I realized was, as an entrepreneur, you are trading stress, not eliminating it. When you're at a job that you dislike, when you are in a position that you're not thrilled with, there are stresses that come with that, right? When I was at my job, I was lacking fulfillment. I knew there was more out there, and that ate at me. That was stressful. When I left my job, that stress was eliminated. I felt like I was able to pursue fulfillment. I was not held back from that. However, there were new stressors that were now introduced to my life. One of them being a financial stressor, knowing that there's no safety net, as well as many other stressors, having to make all of the decisions yourself, having to navigate an uncertain tomorrow, not knowing where you want to go as the final destination. That's hard. That's stressful. So ownership comes with a cost. There's no floor, there's no ceiling. You are trading stress, not eliminating it. And there was this other lesson buried in there where, when you have no other choice but to move forward, when you have no safety net, when your back is against a wall, when you burn the boats, so to speak, you have no choice but to move forward. You have no choice but to do the next right thing. You are forced to be in the arena. And that is a beautiful place. That's a hard place, but it's a beautiful place. And to wrap up this first lesson, that ownership comes with a cost, I entered into this season. I took ownership. That was a decision I made. I don't know if I would ever feel ready to take ownership the way that I did. I don't know if I would ever feel that. But ready is not a feeling, ready is a decision. And I took on this weight, I took on this stress, I took on this ownership, and that is on me. That's lesson number one. Lesson number two, entrepreneurship is personal growth at a high level. Entrepreneurship is personal development in disguise. In the coaching business and in any business, there is emotional volatility. When you have complete ownership, the highs are very high and the lows can be very low. One of the traps that I've had to avoid falling into over and over and over again is making decisions based on emotions, right? On those high days, that positive emotion can skew your decision making. On the low days, the same can happen in the opposite direction. And as an entrepreneur, as someone who's taken ownership, you have to decide to move forward on a path based on principle with intention, no matter how you're feeling. You made a commitment to do this thing on the good days, on the hard days, on the easy days, on the bad days, and every day in between. You get up and you keep moving forward. You stay focused. You come back to the middle. And so, through these first 2 years of full time entrepreneurship, there have been days where I feel like I am on top of a mountain. And the next day, the next hour, the next minute, you can also feel like you just got hit by a bus and you have to get back up. And on the scale of emotions, you have to come back to the middle. That skill of coming back to the middle has been one of the most valuable personal development lessons that I could have ever learned. And I don't know if I would have learned it in the way that I have in such a short period of time if it weren't for this pursuit, if it weren't for building Project Endure. There's a quick quote that I'll throw in from Sarah Kay, who said, because there's nothing more beautiful than the way the ocean refuses to stop kissing the shoreline, no matter how many times it's sent away. No matter how many highs, no matter how many lows, as an entrepreneur and as a human being, we have to be able and willing to go back to the middle. We have to be willing to go back to the middle. We have to be able to go back to the middle. And that starts with an awareness that we are not in the middle. I have this recollection of a specific day last summer in 2022 where I ended up in urgent care. I was having this tightness in my chest. I didn't know what it was. I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I decided to go into urgent care. And it was a scary morning. Everything turned out fine. I was okay. But it was the stress that had gotten to me. It was the emotion of entrepreneurship that landed me in a position where I felt like I needed to seek medical attention. And that is just one of many examples from my experience, and I'm sure a shared experience for many entrepreneurs, where the stresses, the emotions of entrepreneurship can affect our physical and especially mental well-being. Um, I know that was a bit of a tangent, and I'll come back here. You know, taking ownership through entrepreneurship has been about creating the life that I want. It's about creating the life that I want for myself, as well as for the people that I love and care about the most. That is one of the biggest blessings of entrepreneurship and about personal growth in general. It's that you realize you have the power of choice. You can choose to do whatever it is that you would like to do. Sure, life is not going to unfold the way that you plan. It's not going to happen the way that you hope. Life is life. Life is hard. Life is unpredictable and life is unfair. However, we get to respond with intention. That is the power of choice. And we each have that, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're not. If you're a human being with a heartbeat and you're breathing and listening to this podcast right now, you have the power of choice. You can take ownership. You can be intentional and you can create the life that you want. Entrepreneurship has sped up that process for me. Lesson number 3, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Again, making deliberate decisions is important. As an entrepreneur, especially early on in the process, there are a lot of decisions to make. Decisions as inconsequential as what username you make for a login to a bank account, a business bank account, and as important as what is the mission of the thing that you're building? What are the values of this organization that you are creating? Decisions small, decisions large, decisions everywhere. You have to make a lot of decisions. And what I've learned is that slow is smooth and smooth is fast, meaning making deliberate decisions and taking your time to make good decisions, even though it might feel slow in the moment, saves us time down the road because it helps give us a smoother process. And smooth is fast. Now, we're all going to make mistakes. I've made hundreds, if not thousands, if not hundreds of thousands or millions of micro mistakes through these past 2 years. And I will continue to do so. However, the emphasis is not on making the same mistake twice. I've adopted this framework where I look at a decision and I think about the consequences. If the consequences of a decision are low, I will act fast. I will make that decision. If it's right, great. If it's wrong, I will learn. When the consequences of a decision are high, I will act slow. I will be deliberate. I will take my time and I will embrace that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Now, on this topic, I love the phrase little by little, little becomes a lot. And that is one of the things that I've learned through this process, whether it's building a community and gathering members in an online space to support each other and grow with one another. It might feel tempting to add 100 people at once, but 90 of those people might not be the right people for that group. I would much rather add one right person, one good fit every day for an entire year. The process of growing this business has been a deliberate one, and at times it has felt slow. However, I look back and I realize that consistent effort compounds. And as we've grown things here, little by little is becoming a lot. And I'm proud of that. Now, this last point before I move on to the next lesson is a phrase shared by one of our podcast guests and a good friend of mine, episode 7, Hannah Huxley. Hannah has one of the most inspiring stories I've ever heard. And I feel so honored that I got to hear her story and we got to share her story through the podcast. And so if you've never listened to that episode, I would pause this right now, go download it, go bookmark it, go listen to it. Hannah says, forward is still a pace. No matter how slow it might feel like you are going, forward is still a pace. And that is the truth. And that is powerful. Just don't stop. Keep going. Forward is still a pace. So, lesson number 4 from entrepreneurship. Some opportunities are distractions. Another way to phrase this is that in our lives, we all have things that feel like opportunities. However, they are distractions disguised as opportunities. Where this comes into play for me and the journey to this point is that time is precious. If anybody has ever seen my calendar, you have a sense of how packed it can get, how busy it is, how organized I hope you think it is. Because how we spend our time is how we spend our life. How we spend our time is a reflection of our truest priorities. And time is precious. I've learned that a yes to something means no to everything else. And a no to something means yes to all other possibilities. Early on, even before I made this transition, when I was working another job, when I was still a student, when I was coming up and figuring out where I wanted to go with everything, I was a yes man. I was a yes to, you want to hop on a phone call at 3 in the morning? I'm in. You want to set up a Zoom call at 9 p.m.? Let's do it. You want me to sacrifice my workout so that I can grab coffee and make a new connection? Yes, absolutely. While I see the value in that still, and while those habits have helped me create a large and dense network of people that I care deeply about. And I'm grateful for that. I'm so grateful for that. I've gotten to a point and a place where there are so many opportunities that one, I cannot say yes to all of them. There's not enough time for that. And two, I have to start to think with more intention about what opportunities are going to move me in the direction that I want to go and what opportunities in this moment might be a distraction. That is such a challenging process. That is such a hard thing to navigate. I would imagine that most people are like myself, where saying no is challenging. We want to please other people. We want to build relationships. If we have those opportunities, we want to do things. However, I've learned to be selective with my yeses and intentional with the no's. And that has only come about because of all of the opportunities that entrepreneurship has afforded me. I am focused on pursuing alignment and chasing a feeling. Now, I'm going to take a step back here and make a bold statement and say, somewhat seriously and somewhat not, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no clue what I'm doing. Everything that I've done over the past 2 years is unexplored territory. I have never been the founder and CEO of a business before. Not in year one, not in year two, soon to be not in year three. Those are all firsts for me. Every single day is unexplored territory. And so I don't know what a week from now looks like. I don't know what a month from now looks like. I don't know what a year from now looks like. And I certainly don't know what 5 or 10 years from now looks like. What I do know is there's a feeling that I want. There's a feeling deep down inside that I'm pursuing, that I'm chasing. And that feeling is fulfillment, a deep sense of love and belonging, meaningful impact, a genuine happiness, an appreciation for life, for the big things and the small things, and just an awareness of what is most important. Because I think my biggest fear in life, in entrepreneurship, and in life is that I would spend my entire life chasing things that I think are important, only to find out someday when I don't have much time left that I neglected what was truly important. And what I think is truly important are the relationships we have with the people we love and the impact we have on the people we care about. That's what I think. I'm 29. That could change, but I feel pretty convicted in that. And so I want to pursue alignment. I want to chase that feeling. I want to focus on what is important, not what I think is important. I want to focus on the true opportunities, not the distractions disguised as opportunities. And I want to keep the main thing the main thing. And that is one thing that has been a challenge for me throughout this experience is how do I keep the main thing with Project Endure? I want to be able to tell and share impactful stories. I want to be able to grow a coaching business that changes lives. I want to be able to hold in-person events where people walk away with deep, lasting connections. I want to do so many different things. And sometimes it's hard to figure out, okay, well, what is the main thing right now? And how do we keep that the main thing? And that's something that I'm always improving on. I'm always thinking about, and something that I'm not perfect with, but it's a lesson nonetheless. And I wanted to share that with you. And so we'll move on to lesson number 5. This goes along. It's nice to piggyback on lesson number 4 with this, but lesson number 5, boundaries are imperative. I am laughing a little bit because my calendar has time blocked for time with my wife. And in the past, I've gotten questions about that. People don't always understand why I need to put time in my calendar to spend with my wife. The truth is, if I had to share a weakness, uh, I am not good at slowing down. I am not good at taking my foot off the gas. And to end a work day feels like taking my foot off the gas. And going back to the things that are important, I know with all of my heart that the time I spend with my wife is important. That is one of the things I know without a doubt is important. And yet it is hard for me to do that. Not because I don't want to spend time with her, it's because life is busy. She has things going on. I have things going on. I work late. There are opportunities that pop up. I'll record a podcast in the evening. I have a coaching client who maybe needs to push back a little bit because their workday ran over, right? There are things that come up. And then it's 9:30 p.m. I'm done with work. She's done with her activities. I'm getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning the next day. And that's what I want to avoid. I don't want that unintentional time where we're both tired, where I'm just there, but also not there. I don't want that to be the norm. And so boundaries are imperative. I am working on this. I am an active work in progress on this, and I might always be. I am trying to end the workday and end it there. Not say I'm done and continue to respond to messages, not say I'm done and continue to think about, what questions am I going to ask the tomorrow's podcast guest. I am trying to end work and keep those boundaries firm. And that's something that I am working on. Now, leaving a 9 to 5, I thought would provide me with more time, more freedom. However, there's this saying that applies to my circumstance where leaving a 9 to 5 ends up becoming a 5 to 9. So you leave your 9 to 5 for a 5 to 9. That is accurate for me. It's all on you. You have complete ownership. And I'm fighting these all or nothing tendencies is the point of all this. I am focused now on protecting time and creating space and defining my priorities. And again, trusting that if I can stay true to myself, if I can trust the process and truly, truly, truly focus on what actually matters, which is relationships, that life will unfold the way I need it to unfold. So I'll move on from this point to lesson number 6, putting people over productivity. Again, this piggybacks nicely off of lesson number 5. Lesson number 6, putting people over productivity. We can't take anything with us at the end of this life. All we leave is the impact that we had on others. Relationships give life meaning. And entrepreneurship has taught me that there's a difference between things that are important and things that are urgent. And there's also a difference between things that feel important and things that feel urgent, back to opportunities and distractions. For anybody listening, there's this great tool. It's called the Eisenhower Matrix that can help put a visual to how to prioritize the things that are important versus the things that are urgent versus the things that are both and the things that are neither. And I've used that to help navigate this early season of entrepreneurship. And I hope that helps. So we'll move on to lesson number 7. I like this one. Sometimes good enough is good enough. I know there are a lot of people out there because I work with them. I talk with them. I have been one of them. There are a lot of people where perfection will paralyze. The thought of perfection will stop people from taking action. Imperfect action is always better than perfect inaction. Imperfect action is better than perfect inaction. Action creates clarity. When we take action, when we take a step, we get feedback. That feedback feels good. It feels bad. It feels hard. It feels confusing, but it's feedback nonetheless. So when you take action, you get feedback, and you can use that feedback to take a better step, to take another step, to continue moving forward. And I don't think that most people pursue good enough for long enough for good enough to become great. Greatness doesn't just happen. Again, going back, little by little, little becomes a lot. Consistent effort compounds. It doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be good enough. Now, one of the hard things about good enough for me is that I have high standards. I hold myself to high standards. I hold others to high standards. And sometimes that standard that I set for good enough might be a little bit too high compared to what the task at hand needs. And so I've been working on determining what is good enough and what is too much essentially. I don't need to clean dishes and make every dish spotless. I can put dishes in the dishwasher. So, and the funny part about that is I don't love the dish. I don't love the dishwasher because I love doing things myself, and I need to let go a bit. And that's again me as a work in progress through this entrepreneurship journey, learning the lessons, embracing the lessons as I grow through them. So let's go on to lesson number 8. Don't sacrifice impact for income. Leaving a full-time job left a lot of room for me to think about finance. In part, I pursued entrepreneurship to create financial freedom, to generate income, to create a life where money wasn't a barrier, a stressor, an obstacle, even though it always will be in different ways for everybody. That's a different conversation. Don't sacrifice impact for income. Early on, I chose to care about people and to choose impact over income. I chose to do great work in the hopes of creating great experiences for the people that I was serving. I chose to compromise to help other people have access to services that they might not have otherwise had access to. I chose to put impact over income, and that, in an ironic twist, has led to more income. The financial upside of entrepreneurship is appealing, and it's not everything. Impact comes first, income will come second. Lesson number 9. The mess is where the magic happens. It'll feel like it's falling apart. At least it has for me. The first year of full-time entrepreneurship was riddled with mornings where I woke up feeling a knot in my stomach, wondering if this was it. There was an impending sense of doom that everything was unraveling, that it was all falling apart, that I had built a house of cards. Time and time again, I was able to show myself that that was not the case, that we had built a good foundation, that building anything involves messiness. Growth involves messiness. It's uncomfortable. It's uncertain. We don't have all the answers. And so it will feel like it's falling apart. However, growth is uncomfortable. Pain is a privilege. You just have to do the next right thing. The mess is where the magic happens. And learning to live in that mess, in the middle of that chaos, to choose composure despite everything else feeling like it's going wrong, falling apart, out of your control. That's a skill that I don't know if I would have been able to learn without entrepreneurship. Lesson number 10. Those who dance are considered insane by those who can't hear the music. That is a Friedrich Nietzsche quote. It is one of my favorites. And I have learned through this process of building a business and building Project Endure in particular, that people might not understand what you're doing, how you're doing it, why you're doing it. However, you are not alone. People might think you're crazy. People might not understand why you're dancing. There are people out there, however, who are listening to the same music, who are also crazy, who understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, and who want to help and play a part in that. And I have been so fortunate to find those people and for those people to have found Project Endure. We can't live a life based on what we think other people want us to do. We can't live a life that we think the world wants us to live. We have to create the life that we want with intention. And if we do that, if we are authentic, if we choose to move forward on our path and are unwavering in our values, people will find us. The right people will find us. If you're dancing to music and it feels like you're alone, you are not. You need to continue dancing. You need to continue on your path. And the other people who hear that music, they will find you. I'll add to this that the extra mile is the lonely place. When you pursue something that is off the beaten path, when you go further than most people are willing to go, when you do something that's different, it can feel like a lonely place. However, the greatest opportunities don't exist where everybody else is. The greatest opportunities exist in the unexplored territory, in the sparsely populated scenes. The greatest opportunities exist off of the beaten path. Those who dance are considered insane by those who can't hear the music. Keep dancing. And if you're listening to this podcast and you have not yet connected with our community and you feel like these things resonate with you, then I would invite you to dance with us. And I would love that. Those were the 10 lessons. And I am going to share one bonus lesson that is really just an excuse for me to read a quote. Surprise, surprise. This is the quote that has been hanging on my office wall in our first apartment and now in our first house. It has been next to my desk for as long as I can remember. It is incredibly meaningful to me. And if you've listened to this podcast, there's a chance you've heard it before. I want to read it now, and then we'll see where that goes. It's from Theodore Roosevelt, and it goes, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." When I set out on this entrepreneurship endeavor, it felt like I was stepping into the arena. And I imagined that I was stepping into the arena and that all of these critics were going to be watching, that the people around me were there to watch me fall and to watch me fail. I'm not sure where I got that from. 2 years into this experience, I can tell you with confidence that I am in the arena and I wouldn't want to be any other place. I've fallen, I've failed, I've made mistakes, and I continue to get back up. However, the people around me are not critics. Sure, they're out there. But the people in my circle, the people on the circumference of the arena, those people are cheering me on. Those are the people who are dancing with me. Those are the people who understand and believe in the mission and the message of Project Endure. I feel so grateful to have those people in the arena with me. If you're listening to this podcast, I am so grateful for you. We wouldn't exist without the people who support us and believe in us. And that's just the truth. Now, where we are right now as a business, entering the last stretch of year 2, looking ahead to year 3, we are still very much trying to figure out what the final destination looks like, or if there is even a final destination. We do know the feeling that we're chasing. And I described that before, so I'll spare you now. What I want to ask is, if you're listening to this and you have not yet connected with us, if you have not yet asked yourself some of the questions that we ask on this podcast, if you have not yet done the hard thing that you feel like you need to do, that you know that you need to do, go do it. Connect with us. Ask the question. Do the thing. We would love to support you through that. If it's coaching, great. We're here for that. If it's you need a friend, great. We're here for that. If it's I need a tribe, great. We're here for that. If you look in the description of this episode, there are ways for you to get connected, and we would love to help you navigate that. Please reach out. Now, there's a lot more to say. I have been talking for a while now, and I want to get to the question and answer portion of this. We had a bunch of people submit questions for me to answer on this episode, and so we've condensed the questions into a handful with similar themes, similar sentiments, and I'll do my best to answer them now. And then after that, we'll wrap things up. And so hopefully, if you had a question, it gets answered. And if not, please feel free to reach out, because I would love to answer it for you one-on-one. First question: what has been your favorite part about growing Project Endure? My favorite part about growing Project Endure has been the people. Hands down. I have met some of the most incredible human beings that I have ever known over these past 2 years through the vehicle of this podcast, through the vehicle of coaching, through the vehicle of our in-person events, through social media. I've met some of the most incredible, inspiring human beings that I've ever known. And that has been my favorite part about growing Project Endure, and growing with those people has been my favorite part. What is the most important life lesson that you've learned since starting Project Endure? So I shared the 10 lessons plus a bonus lesson. And I would have to go back to that bonus lesson, the arena, the man in the arena. The magic happens in that arena. It is hard to be in that arena. Most people will never go into the arena. However, in the arena, when you fall, when you stumble, when you fail, you get back up. And that's what matters. Strength is only found through struggle. Resilience is only built through resistance. Being in the arena forces us to face the hard things. Doing hard things is what uncovers our potential. It helps us grow. It helps us discover who we were always meant to be. Being in the arena is so important, and I can't imagine my life without it. And I think that's the biggest takeaway I've had through these past 2 years. The magic happens in the mess, and the mess happens in the arena. Next question: how did you find the confidence to start the podcast? It's tough. Before I started this podcast, I was co-hosting another podcast called the Pursuit Podcast with my friend Sam Tooley. And those episodes, even though we don't record that podcast anymore, those episodes are still out there on the internet. And if you go back and listen to some of the beginning episodes, you will hear a difference in my voice. You will know that I was not comfortable or confident. And so that experience helped me to build enough confidence and courage to start this podcast. And while I'm on the topic of that podcast and that relationship with Sam, Sam is one of the people who inspired me to take this risk, to make this move. He has been an entrepreneur for longer than I have. He has built some incredible businesses. He is driven, inspiring. I admire him. He's episode 2 of this podcast, by the way. One of my favorite episodes. It will always be one of my favorite episodes. Sam has been through some of the toughest, darkest circumstances that I know of, and he's come out a better man on the other side. And so I bring that up because there was this one experience that I had, one exchange I had with Sam that pushed me to the edge of that diving board that I spoke about earlier. We were attempting to schedule a guest for the podcast. And now it's myself and Sam and a guest. So there's 3 of us on an email thread, and they're throwing out times, 11 o'clock on a Tuesday, 2 o'clock on a Wednesday, 3 p.m. on a Thursday, 10 a.m. on a Friday, all these times. And every single email I had to respond, I'm at work, I'm at work, I'm at work, I'm at work. I can't do that. And after 4 or 5 exchanges, Sam emailed the thread and said something to the effect of, don't worry about Joe. He's a slave to his work. We'll do this one on our own between him and the guest. And he meant that in good humor, right? Like that's Sam. And I didn't take offense to it. However, it did get me thinking. And I thought, I want to own my time. I want to record a podcast at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday. I want to be able to record a podcast at 10 a.m. on a Friday. I want to be able to record a podcast when I want to be able to record a podcast. And that'll stick with me. That will stick with me for a long, long time. So the courage came from doing it. And then this being my second podcast. But if anybody out there is thinking about starting a podcast or putting themselves out there in general, I would say that you have nothing to lose. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain. So do it. Next question. If you could go back and tell your 24-year-old self something, what would that be? Now, I had this question a few different times using a couple different types of language. But if I could go back and tell my younger self anything, what would it be? Oh, it's a hard question because I almost feel like everything I said in this podcast is what I would want to tell my younger self. I think it would be loving other people is what matters most. It might not feel like it all of the time, but it is. Loving other people is what matters most. Next question. What are your thoughts on don't let excellent be the enemy of good? I touched on that earlier, and I just think that too often we have this idea in our mind of what things will look like. We attach ourselves to a specific outcome. Oftentimes we want that outcome to be perfect. However, it's not about the outcome, it's about who we become. It's not about the end result, it's about the process. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in not letting excellent be the enemy of good. And I think we should focus on doing good enough for long enough to become great. And yeah, I just think you should do it. If you're thinking of doing something, do it, right? It'll probably be imperfect, and that's good. Last question here that I'll answer, and then we'll wrap up this podcast. What is the hardest thing you've ever done and the hardest thing that has ever happened to you? I've asked this question to 100 people on the podcast and many more outside of it. And I've loved getting to watch people process and spill their hearts out about the hardest thing that they've ever done and the hardest thing that they've ever had to handle. The hardest thing that I've ever had to handle up until this point in my life would have to be Best's disease, the loss of sight that I can't control. And I had to think about that for a second. It seems like the obvious answer, but I had to think about it for a second because even though at one point in my life, it was the hardest thing that I've ever had to handle. And I'm sure at a certain other point down the road in my life, if and when I lose more sight, it'll continue to be the hardest thing I've ever had to handle. It very much ebbs and flows. And I'm in a season now of peace and acceptance and surrender. And if I had to sum that all up, I guess the hardest part about the hardest thing that I've ever had to handle has been giving up control and surrendering to the fact that I can't change this condition. I can't change this challenge. I can only change the perspective that I choose to adopt. I can only change my response. That process, coming to terms with all of that, that's been the hardest thing about the hardest thing I've ever had to handle. And then the hardest thing that I've ever done on purpose. I recorded a podcast episode about the New York City Marathon from a physical standpoint. That is it so far because of the conditions and other things. I would say it's between choosing to pursue entrepreneurship and marriage. And it might be a tie. It might be a tie for similar and different reasons. But I think the hardest thing I've ever done on purpose has been pursuing full-time entrepreneurship and pursuing marriage. I am 3 years into marriage, 2 years into entrepreneurship, and we will see how those two things continue to evolve. And for now, I think it's time to wrap up this episode. So if you have listened to this entire thing, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I can't tell you how much of an honor it is for me to be able to spend this time with you. I know how valuable our time and attention is, and it really means the world to me. So thank you. If you haven't yet, head over to whatever platform you're listening to this on and leave us a review. It helps us grow. It really does. It helps us reach more people with more content like this. And if there's anything that you need, whether I know you or not, please don't hesitate to reach out. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I am here for you. I would love to connect with you, and I would love to grow with you. Thank you again for your time. I will talk to you guys next time. We are just getting started. If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.